Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is, how can you basically stop triggering a trauma bond within yourself after you've been through a relationship with someone who has violated your standards, violated your I am, has violated your boundaries, has turned basically situations against you and towards them. You know, there's without your knowing. How did the winds change? How did direction change? And how can you sort of unplug from all this electric, nervous, emotional, spiritual power energy that is oftentimes created as sort of a new on-ramp after you've been through a relationship with someone who is abusive, someone who is narcissistic, someone who is psychopathic, someone who has a pathological sense of self-importance and coupled with a lack of empathy, which means they don't have the ability to feel what you feel or really be a support to you. Why? Because we talk about sort of a spectrum here, and I think this is a great viewer question, is in other words, after you've been through a relationship that's been upsetting, toxic, draining, exhausting, unprofitable, scandalous, whatever you want to describe it as, there's usually some extreme that has come apart, and there's sort of a coming apart of self in the relationship, a feeling less than, a feeling of, maybe a, sort of a less, I want to say half the, there was a song, half the man that I used to be. In other words, you feel like a fraction of yourself. You don't feel that you're at your full potential. You're on sort of a fractured basis, which means you don't feel that you're a full person, have the full big picture. In other words, there's this sort of looming uncertainty, trepidation, fear that tends to always be present after this relationship. So it's sort of conditioned in. So you have to, for relief, from this type of experience where you find you're just on this hyper agitated, unhealthy state and triggering or sabotaging yourself, which means you're setting the odds, even though the odds are for you. If, in other words, you've been preparing for a specific thing, you've been preparing for a class, you've been preparing to graduate, you've been preparing for a job, you've been, in other words, but then you find that even despite your preparation, something always goes wrong. You're too late. You don't show up. You make a fool of yourself. There's all these other sort of upsetting things that you feel then disrupt your day, disrupt the event. It ruins this, it ruins that. So there's all this feeling of sort of regression, backtracking, and not feeling that you're in your best energy, your best alignment, your best self. Well, it's because of the, amount of conditioning. You must understand, if you're in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic or psychopathic, basically there's a real common denominator, and that is disrespect of boundaries and standards. So in other words, boundaries that you should inherently be able to give to somebody. In other words, you don't just go up and violate someone's space and go, oh my gosh, and then just enter into their personal space. There's a violation that a narcissist and a psychopath will, just obligate themselves to, because they don't see it through their mind's eye, they just sort of help themselves to people, situations, circumstances, however it best serves them. And when we talk about psychopathic, we're talking about, a number of other different layers, especially you might see this in business or your career, where there can be, you know, people who then really are very more than competitive, you know, ultra competitive, who will do whatever it takes. And this can be in the name of competition. You know, this is just how it goes in relationships. This is just how it goes. You got to be the best you can be, and all this self-deterring emotional energy begins then to sort of become an emotional avalanche down. And it brings people down, and they can't get sort of a grip, or really what it is perspective, but it feels very physical, very kinesthetic, meaning, you must realize that the body will house and store lessons, memories, very impactful situations that the body will retain and hold on to as a way for you to help navigate your world, navigate a relationship, a tough situation. It's a reservoir of your knowledge. And so your body will replay this again and again. In other words, when you're coming up with it, it's just like going to a restaurant. Well, what do I want on the menu? If you're at McDonald's and you go there a lot, you've probably already memorized it. You don't even need to look. So really, that's what a self-triggering response is. And how do you deal with it and you feel struck? You must realize that the body, mind, and spirit rehearse and memorize specific B states that are very important, significant to its survival, its preservation, and its sort of moving into the future. In other words, survival, versus thriving. And I want to sort of define this when we talk about this in our series and the definition of such. So if you're with, that person who is, you might consider it pathologically selfish. In other words, it's all about them. And you don't discover this because of the way that they have formatted the relationship or taught you about yourself while you're in the midst of the relationship. In other words, there's an environment, there's a context that you have developed this trigger in. And when we talk about the environment, you must realize that there's an emotional environment within. I call it the internal real estate. Your I am, how you value yourself. Especially as it's defined then by the context of others. So it's kind of like a moving target depending on the environment. And I know that this is really complicated, but how do you get some semblance of consistency that is, apart, divorced and divided from all this up and down, whether you're in, you're out, whether they love you, they don't, they're here, they're not, they see the worst of me, they see the best of me. They're trying to oftentimes control the reactions of this individual to feed that continual cycle, that continual loop. And that loop is unhealthy in an abusive relationship. Meaning it's not strengthening, it's not restorative, it's not validating, it's not building. It's one of breaking down. It's one of criticism, one of taking apart, and oftentimes moving apart very important things that should be together, like love and respect, or affection and love. Instead, these things get pulled apart and are set with different meanings, values, tone, and attention, which really becomes incoherent for someone to exist in this sort of relationship dynamic or environment or context. So we have to look at the environment when this self-trigger comes, because if you've been in a relationship with someone who is always clamoring for attention, someone who is narcissistic, someone who has they want to have everything revolving around them, either through what they say, they do, these can come from positive or negative sources. If it's coming from a positive source, it's generally you're going to get something from it and you're going to grow. There's a lack of threat. There's a feeling of trust, a feeling of understanding of boundaries and standards. In other words, it's a given, you know, in support of, you know, this is your boundary and I'm not going to violate that. And then this is your standard. I'm not going to violate that. I'm not going to do specific things, say specific things, raise my voice, lift a hand, ignore you, forget you, neglect you. So there's all this sort of intertwined. And then does it go away on its own? Meaning, because this has been rehearsed and memorized, just like you could reel off, you know, something that you know very well, or something. It could be even something that you memorized. It could be your Pledge of Allegiance and how that feels in the body. A menu, how does that feel in the body? Okay, you know, all these different things. Your body will have a kinesthetic knowledge, meaning it knows what to do ahead of itself. That's the power of the subconscious mind. So it has the ability to sort of jump ahead of things and go, ooh, you know, it can look ahead and know what to avoid, or it can look behind and feel gratitude for, you know, life-preserving actions, movements, and things of this nature. So there's a sort of self-building mechanism, I would say, that's within people that gets really sort of unwired when you're in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic or psychopathic. And we talk about from the pathological sense of self-importance to the psychopathic, or what you might state as criminal. But the reason why we don't use all these words, because people, you know, have these images which doesn't oftentimes match the person who is in their life, because this hurtful person could be very wealthy. They could have all sorts of friends. They could have all sorts of followers. So there's a difference between what they feel in their body and then what they know to then be validated in the environment or the context. So that's why you have to really look at what is going on and what has been done, and in terms of understanding the body and what sort of that reactive state. So in other words, if you've been in a relationship with someone who is violatory of your boundaries, that means your personal space, physical space, you know, and everything that comes with that. So your ability to sort of come from an organic, the way that it was meant to be, without being clipped, chopped down, you know, chopped out from the root. So you can imagine that, you know, the personality is going to have certain strengths that it is inherited within. In other words, certain characteristics that give you a propensity or a leaning to develop in a certain way. But people feel that there's sort of a parallel, a less than, that is sort of alongside their strong self. And they can't sort of peel the husk off to say, this is my core, this is my strength, this is my I am, and this is where no one else can get to it. Oftentimes, that good part of yourself, that pure part of yourself, people feel perhaps has been ruined. It's been given a different perspective other than it being what it is, meaning in the name of love, friendship, support, sort of a pureness that people will approach a relationship with. And it's this that sort of gets destroyed. A sort of pureness, authenticity, realness, lack of fear, otherwise known as love, freedom, all these abstracts, which people like joy, that people look for in the material things that they get, the exhilaration, you know, doesn't have to be found in all these different, you know, the exhilaration of a fast car, the exhilaration of a new toy, you know, all these external things that give this heightened sense of stimulation and then comes back down to baseline. What about the permanency of your I am? Because it becomes very costly to try to keep this relationship going. This is a very costly relationship, meaning it takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot away out of your focus. And namely, that of your resource of self-esteem, which is your worth. And so even though there's a lot of moving parts here, that trigger method, that trigger, which means you're always afraid, you know, that if you don't have your guard up, someone's going to see you for a woundedness, you know, see you wounded. If you don't have your guard up, or a falseness, pretense, or a facade, someone's going to see you as normal. Someone's going to see you as hurt. Someone's going to see you as weak. And then people are afraid that if they drop that guard down, if they drop the facade down, if they drop that false self, that people might not like them. That people might then take advantage of them because they don't have the requisite skills then to be in a relationship without knowing how to protect oneself. So yes, there are a lot of people who will feast, you know, on the weaker. You don't want to be around those people then. Believe it or not, if your focus has been on this type of person for so long, you might not realize that there's other types of people, other types of experiences out there which are different than maybe how you're judging and evaluating yourself, particularly onto the negative. So people have a self-bias after they've been abused or in a relationship where they haven't, you know, been allowed to sort of have their youth. Their youth was taken from them. Their youth was spent taking advantage, taking care of siblings, taking care of the family, taking care of the parents' needs, taking care of, you know, everybody else, and, you know, to the loss of the self. This can happen, you know, in situations where you're not allowed to develop for yourself. You must attend to other requisite needs. You must go and tend to the house. You know, no, you're not doing your homework. You're going to clean the house. No, you're not going to have a relationship. You're going to go and have a job. No, you can't focus on your studies because you're fearful of what's going on in the environment. So in other words, the environment, the context then begins to trump or become more important than the climate within. So it becomes really like one of importance, one of attention, and one of focus. So those people who have been in relationships with narcissists or psychopaths, they have a very strong external locus of control, which means they evaluate themselves oftentimes according to what is around or the people who they are around. So their I am is not strong or stable within. It can oftentimes vacillate according to who's around them, what's around them, what they're able to get away with, what they're able to consume. So their I am is then contingent or pivots on that these external situations which define them. They're in, you know, they've memorized this, and this oftentimes, you know, they say, oh, the narcissist is very superficial. If you can think of it more as shallow, meaning what really, you know, shallow, which means close to the surface. What about what goes down deep? Okay, that is where your personal power is, and this is where people should be able to interact with you from the seat of your personal power. Not if your hair's out of place, then they're, you know, only if your hair is done are they going to interact with you, only if your income is such and such, only if you eat such and such, only if you live such and such, only if your skin, you know, there's all these requirements that oftentimes a narcissist or a psychopath will pack into the relationship. And those people who serve as stepping stones are just that. And they get very, very sort of depleted, depressed, and discouraged when they find that they've sort of been sourced out in a relationship. In other words, but they don't see it, the strength that lies within. And so there's this easy trigger because what your strength has not been validated back to you. You should be able to go on in life and not have a requisite for your strength to be reflected back. In other words, you should know this by now. You know, in other words, this should be within the body. I know how to walk. I know how to carry self-respect. I know not to fall for the trap. I know this before. I've passed the test. So oftentimes people denote themselves or say, I am a failure. And they tend to have a gestalt or all over sort of assumption over their personality, meaning they define themselves as a failure. They identify as a failure. Not just like, oh man, you didn't trust me the way that I was going to cook those steaks. I'm not a failure. I know what I'm doing with these steaks, or I know what I'm doing with this. So they know themselves better. You know, so when you're strong, those people who are strong know themselves better than someone else knows them. So that's got to be your challenge. You know yourself better than the narcissist or the psychopath. And that, I think, is scary. Because in the name of love, oftentimes they've given over the controls. They've said, you're smarter than me. You're more man than me. You're more woman. You're more whatever it is. You know, and you've downgraded. People have unconsciously downgraded themselves because of age, because of looks, because of whatever. Stop downgrading, discrediting yourself, because that oftentimes has been conditioned, which means it has been learned. Just like you went to the McDonald's and you learned the menu. They might have some new specials, but you know, it's pretty much the same, and they advertise all the time. So you have to realize that, you know, your negative I am is kind of like a junk food menu. You've qualified yourself as junk. Where did you get that assumption? You've qualified yourself as a failure. Who taught you that? Okay, these are teachings. You know, you must realize, and those can be pulled out. But oftentimes people hold on to that meaning because that the narcissist or the label that's negative, that's defined by the not. And you know, you might not follow along to a lot of this until you've, you know, this is more advanced. But you must realize that it's the clinging on to that old negative sense of self that has been delivered by this narcissist or psychopath, the individual, the group, the society, or the system that has defined you as such. And then there's this sort of object permanence, almost like a baby, an infant, that has, and I'm throwing on a lot of psychological terms, there's this object permanence. So like an infant, when an infant is just learning about themselves, where they are in the world, and then who their parent is all they are. Okay, the infant, the baby is not their own person. They look at their parents and they go, oh, you know, and they smile and they go, oh, look at the eyes and look at the hair, and they, oh, you know, and they're just, they need that eye contact. And then when the parent goes away, they feel that their self goes away. There's this object impermanent. Oh my gosh, my love, my care, my warmth, my food, all that, you know, and then the baby will cry because it's fearful. It's not crying because it has everything it needs. It's crying because it doesn't have the touch. It doesn't have the eye contact, the food, the cooing sounds. Okay, and then when those are restored, you know, and then the similar thing is kind of like an object permanence with a narcissist. If you have that sort of relationship where you have been then pacified, the narcissist, you know, oh, everything's going to be okay, you stay now, and then they stay a little bit longer. But meanwhile, these people take advantage. They use you for all that you are. You can make their meal. You can pay their bills. You can clean their house. You can support them. You can go without. But then eventually, the narcissist, the psychopath, they are going to move on. They are not in it for that commitment. They can move on very, very quickly. And so this object impermanence, your I am, because you're so used to your I am being solidified by this person, meaning you define yourself how you are in relationship or context, what about, you know, what you bring to the table and how it's nothing but a fraction of really who you are and what you are. But the narcissist, because there's a sort of a lack of validation, a lack of mirroring back of your strength and your wholeness as you can make it on your own, and I love you as a whole person. No, the narcissist or psychopath, you can kind of tell, because they won't reflect back all of that to you. They'll usually reflect back that part of you is not enough. And then the person then identifies and interprets it that they are ultimately unlovable and undeserving. So this trigger always will be there then, because you can then tell that that's the extent that you have learned sort of a negative affiliation or a negative assumption about self. So in other words, you have learned through negative validation, you are not good looking enough. Your hair isn't long enough. Your hair isn't this enough. Your fingernails, your chest, you know, guys, your pecs, your six-pack, your whatever, your watch, whatever it is, your earning power, there's going to be something that has been up for being assailed, meaning part of you, you know, so you have, this is an internal fix. You must know that your I am will kind of come out damaged, feeling hurt, you know, until it's really brought within, until you really see and say, wait, I am enough, and allow this feeling to instead replace what you were experiencing before. Oh, but peace and harmony, how can it have the same weight? I mean, this is my spouse, this is my family, this is my job, this is my career. Well, you are a human being. You are of the divine. You are more than that. You're that and a bag of chips. You're that and a cookie. You're that and more. So you're more than the narcissist or the psychopath made you out to be. And this could have taken place for several years, decades. So this spans your human development, you know, during this period of time. So this trigger will then be, if you're finding yourself, meaning where you feel stuck and you can't go further. You know, in other words, you know, you feel fearful, or you can't get yourself onto the next level because usually there's a fear that someone is going to discover you for being a human, for being less than perfect. And that's okay. It's okay for you to be your true, real, authentic self. Just because the narcissist or the psychopath, they've clearly communicated that that was not enough, or that they just consume people and move on. It doesn't have anything to do with the permanence of your I am. It has more to do with sort of how these relationships go. And it's okay to say these relationships were vapid or empty or unmeaningless. I think that's oftentimes, you know, where the fear can come from, because if you look at a lot of these sort of accomplishments in a relationship with a narcissist or a psychopath, they can be empty or vapid or meaningless, which means they don't have a building effect. Meaning, you know, in life, you know, especially a lot of men, they want to build things, or they want to, there are certain things that their manliness will rest on. And same thing with a female. There's a certain thing that their womanhood, their femininity will rest on. And oftentimes, and we talk so much about gender now and what it means to be a man or a woman, oftentimes what it means to be a woman or a man or a child or a spouse, or that is what's, you know, up for contention or argument or damage. And so you must realize that there's a certain woundedness or a certain bruise to the I am here. But what's really restorative here, I think what I want to say to our viewers is that your definition, the negative definition, basically you don't hang your hat on what is all negative about you. Oftentimes, the negative definition has been in the service of another. And it's oftentimes to the service of another that other people have laid their jacket down. They've laid their, you know, walk over my jacket, walk over. And a lot of us know others who have sacrificed, who have given of themselves for us. Maybe just as we're doing right now, I'm giving of myself to help others who have suffered emotionally, who have not been able to talk or have a recourse to discourse about this. So it's to create a forum. And it's to understand, because oftentimes what people don't understand is that oftentimes it's not a two-way street, which means what you did for them, they will not or cannot do for you. So there's you know, sort of and the narcissist will take advantage of this and use this as a point of contention for leaving a relationship or leaving as an excuse. You know, you can't give me what you know, there's this, and then there's sort of negative repercussion where they go dancing off, you know, into the sunset, and in love, with a job, happy, with money, with whatever it is. What about you? You see, these are the people who will use, who will take, who will insult, who will make smaller, who will make wounded so that they can move on because of a convenience oftentimes, or a lack of empathy, lack of emotional intelligence. And people then are trying to find a thought pattern with which that they can hold on to. In other words, if I can just see the negative in them, you know, and then people tend to hang on too long, just like an infant, to you know, the abject permanence, which means their sense of, like for an infant, their sense of self leaves when their parent goes. So it's kind of like that same thing. It's an infantilized relationship where as an after effect, you might feel that your sense of self is weak, not as strong, depleted, missing something. It is because there's oftentimes a lack of you know, what you gave unto them, they did not give unto you, or in equal or like kind. It's just how these relationships go, but you must say enough is enough. And in the name of love, you might have sacrificed time. Attention is namely, I would say one of the biggest, is really one of the biggest commodities that people then will give is their support, their time, and their sacrifice to give and realize that it's not coming back to them. What they have given in terms of time, sacrifice, is not going back and forth. These people were absent. They are not able to fill the shoes, but it'll seem the other way around. In other words, you're not worth having shoes filled to even be with. So these people who are in a result define themselves as the negative, as not deserving. It's almost like a negative echo chamber, if you will. And you have to realize that that is basically a way really that the narcissist conditions or the psychopath conditions, which means create or cultivate a relationship. So it's important for you to get out of that toxic, unhealthy, deconditioning type of relationship, which means if it's taking too much out of you, it's okay to realize and to state that. And it's okay to not be fearful. It's okay, and because people aren't used to then assessing themselves as enough. They're not used to having the emotional control. They're used to trying to pacify another or keep a narcissist happy or a psychopath, sort of keeping them there, because they don't know any different. They don't know any better. And it's conditioned. It's just like you have memorized, you know, it's like you are a person. There's more to you than a McDonald's menu. There's a lot more, but the relationship, you know, makes it seem like that's all there is to you. And there's so much more. So the good news is there is so much more waiting for you to be discovered. Once you can say, that was then, and realize that it's part of the environment. And to say, right now, I deserve and I desire a much better environment that's more conducive towards my peace, harmony, and my I am, that's not subject to fluctuation. And instead, I want to grow. My I am is worth it. So if you can begin to change this perspective and realize if you look within, you're not looking at a McDonald's menu. You're looking to your true desires, and you need to take it with a little bit more seriousness, a little bit more heart, a little bit more compassion. In other words, all the things that you felt that you did not get, you know, you have to give yourself time. You have to give yourself attention. You have to meet yourself where you are. You have to acknowledge your needs. And you have to realize that it's okay to have these things and that they will be better served once you can champion them for yourselves. And realize that you're gonna change your focus, and that you have the free will to do that, and then to evaluate yourself positively, not because of something conditional, not because of something that you earned, just by virtue of you being, I mean, this is radical. You know, this is radical thinking. This is radical being. And for you to get back to saying it's okay to be myself, and to stop playing according to these old patterns, because there becomes something really called a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you will begin to develop and manifest a negative in your life if you've been conditioned and trained. So you'll keep those until you go put a stop to it and go, oh my gosh, I'm not going back there. You know, you might not know where forward is, but just to say, you know, I no longer, and to have a consciousness and being able to come conscious, it's no longer necessary for me to feel fearful, you know, in this situation. So either with the person in the same, in that house feeling fearful anymore, in that same town, in that same area, you know, all these different things, you can recondition yourself, and it does heal with time. And to realize that this trigger doesn't have to be a permanent thing. It's not a permanent thing. It's very much like the object permanence. It's kind of like, hey, guess what? I don't need a pacifier. I don't need whatever it is. I don't need that to comfort me. My I am is strong enough. And so this oftentimes becomes a really important step for people to make, which is just stopping a negative definition or that trigger of self, which means like leaving it out there for someone else to determine or decide. That's in psychology, which oftentimes is known as an external locus of control. So this comes oftentimes with impulse control, consuming, you know, an internal locus of control. Meaning like I can say I'm going to eat this or not. I'm going to drink this or not. I'm going to think this or not. I'm going to feel this or not. So you get a little bit more used to it being okay for you to call the shots for yourself, because usually in a relationship with an abuser, you're defining yourself by someone else and this other individual, and it might be a series of individuals, but in other words, oftentimes to the negative, which means you're defined by what someone else thinks of you, which means just sort of coming up about, you know, on your own, and then having your own interest. But this is difficult once again. Not to say that this is difficult, is to say this is new. This is new. So it's very important for people to realize that there's going to be new feeling states which are okay for you to feel neutral in and not fearful in. So it's kind of like that's the next step of the journey. It's okay to feel you know, neutral. It's okay to realize it's okay to be on your own, or okay to be single, or okay to get a new job, or okay to do these things, which normally when it would be triggering you, because usually I'm not enough, I don't have enough. There's a negative evaluation. Stop the negative evaluation. This is not, you are not trying to pass like a doctorate of some sort of finals. Why are, you know, because people are so used to being tested by these individuals that they set up constant tests for themselves. And then they're really not becoming who or what they want, because they're kind of always sort of keeping themselves in that negative, you know, in that negative testy state. So it's okay when you realize these in the course of your day, just say it's okay to stop testing myself. I am enough, and I have done the best that I can. And there becomes, you know, the forgiveness, and not just, you know, you and somebody, but you personally. You have done the best that you can. Despite other people's evaluation, despite other people's judgment. What about your assessment of self? Between you and God, between you and the divine, between you and the bigger picture. And to say, you know what, this, you know, is something that's more important to me. And then you have like a bigger and growing sense of mission or importance. A lot of people try to make themselves very small to become very isolated. This can become very regressive. And you might sort of, you know, you might have to go within, and you might feel that your world is shrinking. Realize that you're coming into your own, your I am. And this is okay, but what I want to encourage is to not, is to go through these swaths of time and just to say, you know what, this is exactly what I need. It's okay for me to comfort self. You know, it's okay for me to, and usually there's something else that the narcissist or the psychopath told you, you know, you could not do. You can't spend your, you know, you can't have this, you can't live like this, you can't be like this. Usually there's something that was told that you can't, you know, be, do, have, otherwise you wouldn't be lovable, you wouldn't make the cut, you know. So there's something about you that you might need to relax into, and it's okay for you to relax. It's okay for you to be. This is a strange thing, especially now with technology. I mean, we're just going to have to see. But this is a new, it's okay for you to not be always improving, okay? Or pleasing somebody. Okay? In other words, you're looking for this evaluation. Am I okay? Am I lovable? Am I good enough? That's a lot of the fear. It's this unresolved fear. So it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some knowing. What negative have you heard so much? What negative have you felt so much? How long has this been? How many times have you played this on your internal? For how, so you can realize to the extent to which it's housed within, and so to a degree, then you're going to say, I am okay without this, but I am okay without feeling less than. I am okay without feeling this constant and then you can say, I am okay, and then where am I going to go? And you don't have to always know the answers. You're just going to say, I am going to believe that it is okay for me to move on, even though you don't have anything backing it up. And you can say, I have trust and faith in me backing that up. That might be a first for you. And so you might not then, this will show you to what degree do you have a lack of trust and belief in yourself. Because that's usually what happens, I would say, as a result of the, narcissist or psychopath relationship. The biggest toll that they take is a lack of belief in self of others. They leech that out, they take that, and they reflect back, these sort of things like, in other words, they won't validate certain strengths to help you build and in a career, in a relationship, in your I am, in your faith. So to what degree, fear will keep you stuck. It'll keep you always sort of hitting, it'll keep you playing small. And you can say today, in what way have I been playing too small? In what way have I definitely been playing too small? And you can see, and to what degree, can I open up, and is it okay? Because you're going to keep yourself stuck in the same job, people, where you're living, what you're wearing, what you're eating. And you can see all these things will go to keep you playing small, playing fearful. I don't know. I don't have what it takes. They're too afraid to be independent because they want to, their sense of self is validated sort of then on this support of others. And as people mature, you're going to want to grow and build and be stronger rather than regress and go weaker. So there are certain elements, that, people can be caustic. People can be caustic, which means they can be toxic, and you oftentimes don't know the forest for the trees, what is toxic or what is not. And until you can see, oh, what I was going after, all that, and what I wanted, that was toxic. Oh, and then to realize that fantasy or that is no longer what you're going after. That was toxic. In other words, now I want the real relationship. I don't want the false. I want this. I want the real. I want to, and then you can define in what ways was this relationship causing me to play too small. And that's, a self-sabotage, sabotage, it's a military term, to sabotage oneself, behaving in ways that you don't like. You have the power over this, and only you can just decide. But if you can make even a baby step, oftentimes can be the biggest step, which is the awareness, and how you want to change, and to have the inner belief. So oftentimes there's an inner belief state that has not been experienced. So it's pushed away, and what you resist will persist. So to what degree then can you acknowledge to say, I've been conditioned to not see my own strengths, to not see my own wellness, or to believe in it. So really, when it comes right down to, oftentimes people have a greater belief in others than they do in themselves. So this becomes a very strange psychological shift to make, and to start doing what's working, because that can be very scary, because it, this is what happened before, and then it all came crashing down. So it's important to see and take stock of, hey, this did work for me, even though it's a little step. You don't need these big, huge shifts to say, hey, what I'm doing is working. People think that, oh, I should have this whole new life by the time that I wake up if I just, say, okay, I'm out of it now. Realize and take heart in the small steps as it comes to believing in yourself, and to then join up and realize people are going to, different types of people are going to come to you, and you might feel, much to your dismay, that you're leaving certain B states, not life behind. You're just leaving certain negative B states behind, and instead you're just going to be. In other words, you're going to stop causing all sorts of distress for yourself. It's the old, you got to sleep in the bed that you make. In other words, people will create a big mess in their life unnecessarily. Let's stop doing that. When you see it start going, go, whoa. Just put on the emotional brakes and stop it from going there. Just say, okay, been there, done that. I've gone there. Okay, it's someplace different now. And what does that mean for you? Well, right in that minute, what does it mean? I'm going to sign up for a new class. What proactive can you do? Instead of playing small, instead I'm going to proactively, and fill that in for yourself. List 1 through 20. I'm going to proactively, what are you going to do that's going to give you that better sense of self? And just say, okay, finally, I'm okay with just being. And then just having self-belief and knowing what that might feel like within the body, and having a body scan. What does it feel like? And usually it's when you say, I'm ready for the next good thing. And what is the next good thing for you? What is the next good thing? And it might not, it might very much feel like you are disappointing someone, but you must take stock of where you want to go and believe enough to take the steps. Write the book, do the trip, do the exercises, following up, take the moment, give yourself the recovery gift. Do these things and follow up and get on a program that you can plug into and stay in consistently enough. And to even say, like, this channel takes other levels, the people or topics here are going to evolve as well. So it doesn't mean, you're going to stop healing. You're going to continue to heal. But it's so, just to say, instead of freaking yourself out, I'm going to stop freaking myself out. Literally say, and that's okay. But usually it's that freaked out, always image that the narcissist always wants you to be, or otherwise things aren't fun enough. Stop evaluating yourself. Just stop evaluating and allow yourself to be, proactive. And I play small when, and get to know when you're playing small, and instead I take delight in, I take joy in, I take comfort in, I take strength, I take faith in. And you might have faith in something bigger than yourself that runs and flows through you. And I hope that you have the ability to see something about yourself that is within that next rung, and and break this cycle, stop this cycle, and instead allow yourself to have a vision moving forward. Even if it's a little vision moving forward, I'm going to do better tomorrow. I'm going to do better this afternoon. I can do better. We can do better. All these different things are new repertoire that you develop within as you sort of turn the sound down on those negative thoughts that have been conditioned and played so loud. You know, instead of pump up the volume to the negative, pump up the volume to your I am. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. And I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out and have a beautiful day.